Hey there, welcome to Ask Daniel number 29. Hope you're doing really well, wherever you are and whatever time zone you're in and whatnot. We have a couple of questions and other things to go over today. And as always, nothing's medical advice, just general thoughts and questions that I hope will be helpful to anyone that tunes in. So with that said, I want to actually start with this comment that came in 3 days ago, and I forgot to talk about this last week. And there was a really, really cool insight here that I want to talk about. So this is a comment on Insomnia Insight number 300, and it is from Joe. And she wrote the following. And by the way, so that episode was about Alex, who was sharing in that episode how he'd gone on to sleep really well. He was like 100% back to his regular sleep that he had before he started having trouble sleeping. Now, what he said was the main thing that was helpful to him was not caring that much about sleep, and I did the quotation marks there because oftentimes if you have trouble sleeping here and you hear me say that not caring was really helpful to somebody, it's hard to just decide not to care. So I usually word it as like, try to get to a place where you worry less, shift your attention, don't focus so much, etc. But he used the word like, I stopped caring so much. Anyway, here's what Joe said. Totally agree. I've not been sleeping through lately, but I don't care. I know I've been breaking all the rules and lying in, but it doesn't matter as I no longer worry about it. Sooner or later, I'll email you my story, Daniel, smiley. And when I read that comment, I was like, that this is really insightful. And what my thinking was, what I talk about on this channel is based on cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, or CBTI. And, and the initial part of it is kind of very cut and dry. There are a lot of rules, like, you have to get up this time, don't go to bed before this time, don't sleep during the day, etc., etc. Now, those rules, interestingly enough, are there to help you, set the stage for you sleeping better. And when you start sleeping better, you worry less, and you're less afraid of losing sleep, etc. So they take you to a place of not caring so much. And then when you're no longer that worried, you can break the rules because you don't need them anymore. And then you're actually on your path towards sleeping really well, because somebody who sleeps amazingly well, they don't have any rules, they're not paying attention at all to how they sleep. So it's interesting how my thinking was, Joe has been breaking all the rules, but it doesn't matter because she doesn't care. She's not longer focusing so much on sleep. She doesn't worry much. And it kind of completed the cycle there that I never thought about it, but it's like you have these rules that are there to help you sleep better, so you don't care. Then you can break the rules. And Joe is breaking the rules and seems to be doing well. And I totally agree with you. You don't need any rules when you're starting to sleep better. So Joe, I want to thank you so much for that comment. Very insightful one and very helpful one. And with that said, let's move on to a question here from Gary. And so this came in 3 days ago, and there's actually two emails from Gary that we should read here. Okay. Hi, Daniel. In 2016, I went from having trouble falling asleep to trouble staying asleep. I was in school back then, and I would have trouble falling asleep if I had an exam or a deadline coming up. This would not happen frequently. I decided to try sleeping pills. This, I suspect, was what caused my sleep maintenance insomnia. Before using the sleep pills, I would have no issues staying asleep after falling asleep. After using the sleeping pills 3 times in total over a 2-week period, I started having my sleep maintenance early morning awakening insomnia. Basically, I wake up 5 hours after falling asleep. I've had this condition since then, and it happens pretty much every day. I never feel rested when I wake up, and a few hours after waking up, I start feeling sleepy again. I have no idea how the sleep pills caused this. I used to sleep around 7 hours prior to this and would always wake up feeling rested. I would appreciate any tips or recommendations that you might have to combat this condition and restore my normal sleep. And then I replied that I would make this video on Monday. And Gary said, thanks for your prompt response. I hope you're doing well. Look forward to your video Monday. I've read some articles on the web about early morning insomnia being caused by a shortened circadian rhythm a circadian rhythm that is shorter than 24 hours. I'd appreciate it if you cover this theory and its plausibility in your next video. As I mentioned in my previous email, this change in my sleep duration happened right after I used a few sleeping pills over a short period. I've known people use sleeping pills and they do not have such effect. Also, could you cover the dangers of sleeping pills? So a couple of things to go over here. Let's start actually kind of in the reverse order here. I think that's the best way to do this, and talk first then about the last question here, the dangers of sleeping pills. So you often come across, or you may come across articles where they say, or blog posts or whatever it is, where they say that sleeping pills are harmful to your health, your body. And one that you hear often is that they can affect your memory, and maybe even like, there's suggestions out there that they could cause, Alzheimer's disease or dementia or things of that nature. And my understanding of the literature and my opinion, my belief here is that I don't think sleeping pills are that harmful. I don't think there's any evidence of that. And the only way you could truly find out is to do a randomized study. If you took 1,000 people and give half of them sleeping pills for 10 years and see who got most health problems, that's the only way you could really determine that. Nobody's done that, so it's unknown. There are a lot of associations out there. Actually, we'll talk more about that later in this episode. Later in this episode, we will talk about how there's no causal relationship between short sleep and health problems. But same thing I want to say with sleeping pills. There's no evidence that taking sleeping pills causes any health issues at all. And sleeping pills in some shape or form have been around for decades. If there was a definitive causal link, if sleeping pills definitely caused health issues, I think we would know that by now. It wouldn't just be like associations or speculations or thoughts. We would probably know that by now. So I think from a pure health perspective, I do not believe sleeping pills are harmful. I do believe that they are harmful in a different way, and that has to do with your sleep confidence. And we'll get to that as we go backwards here and answer the questions in reverse order, if you will. So that was number one. Number two, I read some articles on early morning insomnia being caused by a shortened circadian rhythm. Now, here's the thing. Circadian rhythm simply means, a rhythm that takes place in around 24 hours, circa dian, around 24 hours. And when you look at our humans' circadian rhythm, it's interesting. If you take a bunch of humans and put them in a bunker where there's no external cues, they don't know what time it is, etc., most people start actually displaying evidence of kind of a longer than 24-hour rhythm, meaning people start going to bed. If people the first night went to bed at, let's say, 12, they get up at 7, right? Then the next night they tend to go to bed at 1, and then get up at 8, and then 2, and it's kind of drift like that. So if anything, it seems like most humans have a circadian rhythm that's a little bit longer than 24 hours, perhaps. But a shortened circadian rhythm. Here's the thing with this: I've never come across anyone that has a circadian rhythm that's shorter than 24 hours, and I don't find evidence that that's a thing. Meaning, sure, if you take a bunch of people and put them in a bunker, some people may actually have a shorter circadian rhythm. Some people might have a little bit longer one. But how does that really matter? And does that really explain why you have trouble sleeping? I believe the answer is always no. Circadian rhythms are entrainable. As long as we get up at the same time every day and we go to bed when we feel sleepy, circadian rhythms they're non-issue. They do not cause insomnia, in my belief system, in my opinion. Definitely not. But I want to sneak in one more thing here. Here we're talking about circadian rhythms. Could that be a reason why I have this problem sleeping? I get that question or a variation of that question all the time. And it's always is X the reason that I can't sleep? And X could be a hormonal imbalance. It could be the fact that I had kids, or that I had an accident, or the fact that my cortisol level is low. Is that, people always ask, is that the reason? I can't sleep well. And it's natural to try to figure out what the reason is, right? Because we always think like if we figure out what the problem is, then we can fix that. The thing is with insomnia is that like let's say your circadian rhythm or hormone levels or things like that, sure, they could all affect your sleep to some degree in the short term, but only the only thing that can cause like long-term trouble sleeping, insomnia, like long-term insomnia, is our own habits, belief systems, and our reaction to kind of our thinking about what's going on. So to shorten that and hopefully express it a little bit better, X is not the problem. It is thinking that X is the problem. That is the problem. Or X is not the problem, but it's kind of like spending a lot of time wondering whether X is the problem, investigating X, etc. That is the real problem. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. Now, going backwards again to the first email here. Let's go through it in detail. So first of all, it seems like Gary, you were sleeping pretty well, even actually in 2016. And I want to say here, as I read this first part, the main thing that what I really thought about was that you didn't have what I would call insomnia at the time more than normal insomnia. I mean, you had some anticipatory insomnia. What happened in 2016 was like I was back in school. I would have trouble sleeping if I had an exam or deadline. This would not happen frequently. So that I would say is normal. That was completely normal. We all have trouble sleeping before a big day, before an exam, etc. It's just our body's way of like making sure you're up to the task. A little bit of anxiety is good. It makes us, perform better, like be focused, etc. So that I would say was actually normal. And then I decided to try sleeping pills. And here's the thing, like that is the classic way insomnia starts. Like you have a baseline where you're sleeping good, or you're kind of having insomnia issues like here and there, but there's no real problem. And then there's that moment when you're like, oh my gosh, I'm not really sleeping that well. I have to do something about it. What happens in that moment is that you're increasing attention. You're starting to like think about your sleep, worry about your sleep, and you started to kind of tweak things and like kind of manipulate it, try to make it better. In this case, trying to try sleeping pills. And then it says, this is, I suspect, what's caused my sleep maintenance insomnia. I think so too, but maybe for a different reason than you might have been thinking. So my thinking here is that taking sleeping pills for a couple of times, that in itself is not going to do anything to like your brain, your sleep system, your circadian system, or anything like that. It has absolutely no effect on it. But your kind of sleep confidence, your habits, your beliefs, that can be affected a lot, even by just anything like taking sleeping pills once could affect that. Meaning you take a sleeping pill one time and let's say nothing happens. You end up, meaning it quote unquote doesn't work, like it doesn't help you sleep better. Then that can make you feel like things are hopeless, things are frustrating, nothing works, my insomnia is weird and unusual. And that can lead you to have sleep maintenance insomnia. Or it seems like the medication is quote unquote working, you're sleeping a bit better, but you now feel like I can't sleep on my own. I need this pill to sleep. It erodes your sleep confidence. Both that. So taking sleeping pills can definitely cause insomnia for sure, even if you just took it like 3 times. So I would say it's very likely, in my opinion, when I hear something like this, that the sleeping pills cause sleep maintenance insomnia, but mainly because it kind of messes with your sleep confidence, your belief system, your thoughts, etc. And now I would appreciate any tips or recommendations that you might have to combat this condition. One thing I always like to point out, a lot of people ask me like, how can I, battle my insomnia or overcome my insomnia or like crush my insomnia or combat my insomnia? And the key thing there is you can never win if you look at insomnia as an opponent, as something to defeat, And the reason I say that is insomnia happens because we're trying to do that. Like we're trying to produce more sleep. We're trying to do things so that we sleep more. We're trying to escape sleeplessness. It feels like a battle, a struggle that you have to win. In fact, it is the struggle itself. It's the battling, the fighting. That is what fuels the insomnia. So the key here is step away from the fight. Step away from it. Stop looking at it as a battle. That's the path. That's the way to really get good quality sleep. That person who sleeps really well, they're doing so because they're not exerting any effort. They're not trying. They're not doing anything to sleep better. They have no struggle. They don't even know of a struggle. And if you have trouble sleeping, it might feel like, how I can't just decide to be like that person. Of course not. I totally understand that. But again, it is very important to take step towards not thinking of it as a combat or battle or struggle, etc. Now, tips and recommendations. I always recommend the same thing for everyone out there. Set it and forget it. Set it and forget it. What I mean by that? Well, I mean, number one, spend less time in bed. Get up at the same time every morning. Get out of bed at the same time every morning. And let's say that's 6 a.m. And then spend maybe 6.5 hours in bed or 7 hours in bed, but not more. So let's say you decide, I'm going to get up at 6. I'm not going to go to bed before 11. And I'm not going to go to bed unless I feel sleepy, unless I feel ready to sleep. And this doesn't, nothing's going to change in the short term maybe, but after a few weeks, typically people notice that, oh, I had that night where I actually slept through the night and I didn't, I didn't wake up that time. And then that's really important, because that's the kind of magical moment when you start believing like, oh, there's nothing wrong with me. This works. I can do this, etc. It's working. So that's really helpful. So I would say, and then forget it part. The forget it part is like, once you've educated yourself, and I recommend just using my channel here or picking up a book like The Effortless Sleep Method is really good, or Say Goodnight to Insomnia. Once you've educated yourself to a point where you're like, okay, I understand why insomnia happens, I understand why I have it, then the forget it part is really important. And that's like just try not to investigate, try not to research, try not to figure it out, and just do things that make you happy and that you enjoy, etc. So that's the forget it part. So set it and forget it is really good. So Gary, hope this was helpful to you. Thanks so much for the question, and please stay in touch. All right. So we talked about 2 things. We have 2 more to talk about. And Hamza has shared some live questions here. Hamza asking, where are you from? Well, I live in Eugene, Oregon. I grew up in Sweden. My mom is Ethiopian. My dad is Danish. So it's a whole constellation there. But that's that. And now, Hamza, what are your thoughts on coronavirus? I feel like it's, as I talked about the other day, there's a lot in the insomnia world that I think applies to our collective reaction to coronavirus. So what I mean by that is some things in our lives are what's called circumstance. They're things that we cannot control. We can't. We have no influence over them. And every so many years, there is this, like we had SARS and MERS and swine flu, bird flu, etc. Every so many years, there is like a mutation in a virus and there's a new strain of it. And we can't do anything about that, I believe. I think that's always going to happen. But what we can do something about is our reaction to it, And I think there's what really worries me is the reaction. It is when people get really fearful and anxious and start hoarding things and and everything shuts down. Everybody becomes fearful. That reaction, I think, it's very dangerous, because I just thought the other day about what if people start to hoard medications, albuterol, insulin, like that. We can't do anything about the fact that there is going to be viruses around, but our reaction, I think, is more harmful than something we actually can. In my opinion, I don't think we can control. So that's what I worry about. And by the way, the media and what we hear, there's it's just like insomnia. There's no voice of reason. There's nobody who kind of is calming down and saying, at least not authorities and media, etc. They're just there to kind of fuel the fire. Yeah. So anyway, some thoughts on that. Now, I wanted to thank Chad for sending me some messages the other day, and I'm gonna share a link here from an article that Chad had come across. It's talking about the title is like, "Do you really need 8 hours?" And it's from a site called Examined Existence, and it's going over a large study from 2002 with like more than 1 million people included, that shows that it actually shows something we've seen all the time, which is that those people that estimate getting 8 hours of sleep actually have a much higher all-cause mortality. Like they have higher risk of dying for any reason than people who estimate sleeping 6 hours. And now, again, not trying to scare anybody. Like, I don't think sleeping 8 hours is harmful, not at all. I just want to point out that the pervert. We always hear you should sleep 8 hours. If that recommendation had come from a place of like evidence, looking at studies, it wouldn't be there, because A, actually very few people sleep 8 hours, and B, if anything, 8 hours is more highly liked with like health problems than sleeping less. Now, why is that? That's an important one. I believe that is because people that have health issues often become really tired and feel the need to rest more, and then may overestimate how much they sleep. So I think sleep, like health issues, drives people to estimate that they sleep more than they actually do. And I think the same thing is true at the other end of the spectrum. I think people with a lot of health issues often have poor quality sleep and don't sleep well, and then just feel like they don't sleep at all. So I think health issues is driving all that association we see between like extreme short sleep. Like sleeping like 4 hours is just as dangerous as sleeping 8 hours. I don't think sleep has anything to do with it. I think it's just health issues that are driving both those things. But it's a good article to review. And then finally, where is that? Oh yeah, that's another email, and this is from Leah, who is actually, I'm gonna say Leah, but we know her on the channel as Vegan ASMR. Let's see, where is this? 7 hours ago, 2 days ago. Yeah. Let's see, where's the question? Oh, here it is. Sorry, I just missed it. Leah sent me a bunch of articles on these neurological conditions we refer to as sporadic fatal insomnia or familial fatal insomnia. Anyway, so let's see this. Okay, so here's a question from Leah. There's actually one big question I want to ask you. After you read my summary concerning the sleep-related behavioral disturbances like movements and breathing irregularities, do you as a sleep physician think that the patient himself would actually notice these behavioral abnormalities? Because that is the point I'm struggling with the most. I know that oftentimes people with, for example, periodic limb movement disorder or sleep apnea don't notice these phenomena until someone is telling them what they actually behave like when they're asleep. But I also know that in FFI, the key feature is that the sleep is not deep anymore, but getting lighter and lighter, and people awake frequently during nighttime, and also that movements, jerks, and apnea are worse than just normal obstructive sleep apnea. So my conclusion is that you would notice this, and in my summary, there is evidence that people notice them because of many of them are complaining, especially about the involuntary movements during the first examination in hospital. But my problem is that I don't know this. And so when I'm awake at night struggling with fear of fatal familial insomnia, trying to tell myself, calm down, Leah, you don't have involuntary movements or breathing abnormalities, then the evil part of my brain is telling me maybe you have those and you just don't notice. I even went so far that I thought about buying a camera and filming myself during sleep to reassure myself. But then I always think like, no, that's not necessary because you would notice. I think if a sleep physician would tell me this, I would be more convinced about it. But I also know that actually you can tell me because you've never seen a real FFI patient in a sleep lab. True. Maybe you could just tell me a bit about your experience regarding people that have a severe movement or breathing disorders who don't have FFI. Okay, I can definitely share this and then go towards where I think me sharing this is actually not that helpful. But what I'm going to say after that, I hope will be helpful. And then I want to read actually the other emails from Leah. But here's the thing. Yeah, I've seen a lot, when you do sleep studies that are traditional sleep studies in the hospital, you do check how many like leg movements a person has. And you very often pick up leg movements that the person is completely unaware of. And now there are other, so that's PLMD, periodic limb movement disorder, is when people have involuntary recurrent kind of jerky leg moves in sleep that they typically are not aware. It's typically like people tell them, hey, you were moving, you were out walking, you were moving your legs a lot overnight. And then you have, but then on the flip side, when it comes to sleep apnea, both is true. You do often see people who have no clue that they stop breathing in their sleep, or others who kind of wake up choking, so in that scenario, people can notice them. You have another kind of relatively common movement disorder in sleep, let's call it that, which is called REM behavioral disorder, where people act out their dreams. We're supposed to be paralyzed in REM sleep, and sometimes that doesn't happen. So we dream something and then we wake up like doing that thing we dreamt about, and those patients always know it. So I want to say, when it comes to movement disorders or breathing issues in sleep, sometimes people notice them, sometimes they don't. I don't think that is actually really helpful to you or anyone that is thinking in the terms you're thinking, Leah. But here's my thinking is that, I've gotten like a bunch of articles from Leah, and she shared that that's not all of them. Those are just the kind of important ones, which tells me how deep into research you've gone, Leah. And in fact, what I want to say rarely happens has kind of to some degree happened in your case, which is there has been some positive outcome of all this research, which is that you've come to the conclusion that insomnia, what we call insomnia, which is like I can't fall asleep, I'm struggling to sleep, etc., like the subjective feeling of like I have trouble sleeping, is completely different from what people with these neurodegenerative conditions have. And that's a good thing. But then again, it's not like all this research has led you to a place where you sleep really well. It has not. You're still having trouble sleeping, and which highlights how looking for the truth is not the path, because the truth is not there to be found. Like people ask about all kinds of things. Like somebody asked earlier, Gary asked if, what was that? Could I have a circadian rhythm that's shorter than 24 hours? And is that why I have trouble sleeping? Well, I shared my opinion. I don't think so, but that's not the truth. The truth would, it can feel like you can get to the truth by doing more investigating, by doing more reading up, by, talking to people and finding out the truth. And when you know the truth, that will like be really helpful to you. In reality, like the process of looking for the truth just feeds insomnia, because, again, going back to that person who sleeps really well, they do that because they don't think about sleep at all. When you start thinking about sleep, wondering, worrying, pondering, thinking, that process is what causes insomnia. Insomnia is a passive process. It happens when we don't try to sleep. The more you wander, the more you think, the more you're actually kind of trying to sleep, and that produces a lot of insomnia. So I think the question of like, would I, if I have this condition, notice these movements or not? It can feel like coming to a conclusion there, finding the truth is what will ultimately lead you to sleep better. I believe that abandoning the search is much, much more likely to help someone like yourself sleep better. I love to talk about these existential questions like how big is the universe, what happens after we die, like all those things. Like, you cannot find the truth, even though it feels like when you talk to people, you read up, you discuss, it feels like you're getting closer, you're scratching the surface, but in reality, most of us have to abandon the search. We can not really find the truth, so we abandon the search, and guess what? You can live a very happy life, even if you didn't find the truth behind those existential questions. So those are my pins on that one, Lee. I hope that was helpful to you. And I want to really read something Leah wrote that I was like, I'm just 100% in agreement with that, and I feel like I want to share that with other people. Firstly, yeah, this one. Thank you that I could send this to you and discuss the topic. I absolutely understand the people that fear having these conditions, spirit feeling, FFI and SFI. It's like you always have your insomnia problems, but never really think of them. Then all of a sudden there comes the media and a group of some Italian researchers telling you this could be a deadly disease. In my opinion, it's a great mistake that they call this disease insomnia. But researchers want to publish and media want to be consumed and both get attention by spreading fear and telling nightmares. It's a tragedy. You should really believe nothing you read or watch online nowadays. I cannot agree with this more. It is just like that. And first thing that comes to mind is like, you always have your insomnia problems, but never really think of them. And then all of a sudden, that's like Gary, right? You have your trouble sleeping, but you don't think much about it. And then you decide to take a sleeping pill in his case, or in Leah's case, here comes the media. Something triggers that, fear and anxiety and worrying, trying to figure it out, and then you have insomnia. And in this particular case, it's just like that. Like, why are these conditions called insomnia? That's a great mistake. But exactly, researchers need attention. They need funding. They need to be published. Media needs attention too, and that's why they always scare you, and that's what I felt like is happening today. And by the way, if you're watching this in 2026 and you're like, what do you mean today? What do you mean today? And that's because like today we're living in this like coronavirus panic, where people are like super scared and anxious, and the reaction to something that I believe is is uncontrollable to us humans. The reaction to it is just so strong, and I believe it's driven again definitely by media, by scientists, like researchers that now have their day in the sun, and they can talk about this. And the more they spread fear, the more attention they get, and the more attention they get, the more they need to scare you, et cetera, et cetera. It's just like this vicious cycle. It's a vicious cycle. And yeah. And I think the final I want to read is again. This final words here are going to be from Leah again. She says, "The more I read and research about this topic, the more angry I'm getting about this whole anxiety-producing science products. I already thought about diving deeper into this whole thing and making kind of a documentary about it." Anyway, anxiety-producing quote-unquote science. Yeah, it's a sad state of affairs. It's a sad state of affairs. I hope that. Here's my thinking. We are actually living in the most being a human today. We're living in a place. We're in a planet of abundance. Starvation is all but gone. Like we're no longer like toiling the soil to get something to eat. We're in the safest planets, the less armed conflicts in the world. Everything is actually getting better and better and better and better. Not like day by day, baby, but decade by decade, things are getting better. Now, media is kind of struggling with this because what really gets attention is fear. And in a world where things are actually getting safer and better all the time, they're getting outcompeted. People prefer being on Facebook or Twitter or hanging out with their friends, and we're not paying attention to media anymore. So I think what they have to do is they have to sensationalize everything they can. They have to be alarmist. That's the only way, media can still get some of our attention. And I think and I hope that we're living in a time where this is an extinction burst. These extinction bursts are really important. It's like, you have a toddler that's like always kind of acting up to get your attention, and you decide to do the right thing, which is like, don't give it any attention. Well, guess what? That toddler's going to scream and kick and shout and do everything it can to get your attention before it realizes that it's not worth it. I'm not getting attention. And then it stops, right? I believe that's where media is today. They're trying everything they can to keep our attention. And I believe and I hope it's an extinction burst. And when they can't, there are no tricks up their sleeves, they can't do anything more to scare us, then they probably will just give up that strategy and just spread the good word about what's happening. And of course, report things that are of general interest. There's always going to be negative things happening too, but this whole alarmist, like sensationalized, like catastrophe scenarios that they're trying to spin all the time is hopefully going to die down. So with that said, thanks everyone for sending comments and questions and all that, and I really appreciate it. And please stay in touch, and I'll be back if questions come in. I know people's attentions are in a different direction, which actually I want to add one last thing, which is ironically, I think a lot of people can actually this time where there's so much fear and attention is going towards this, the panic. A lot of people's insomnia is actually going to get better, because insomnia is fueled by us thinking about our own sleep, trying to improve our sleep, like to figure out, etc. And when our attention gets diverted, when we stop thinking about sleep, you can ironically actually sleep better. So yeah. So anyway, people's attention a little bit scattered now. So what I want to say is, if I still get questions, I'll be back here on Thursday answering them. If not, maybe next week. But until then, take care of yourself. Stay in touch.